So the question we're exploring is objective truth non-existent, or does objective truth really exist? And so the reason we wanted to pursue this question is because we often hear that you have your truth, I have my truth, you need to be inclusive. And I'm all for inclusion, but I don't think that everyone's worldview is true. And I don't think that just being inclusive means that. And I don't think you do either, even if you say you do or should. So I'm going to talk about philosophy, history, and theology. So make sure you don't tune out. I think a good place to start is with the laws of logic. So there are three basic laws of logic, and here they are. Firstly, it's the law of identity. This states that any statement, for example, Arthur is talking, is that statement. So if we make that into a variable, let's say the statement Arthur is talking is the variable A, then the law of identity simply says that A equals A. The second law of logic is the law of non-contradiction, or the law of contradiction. This states that A cannot both equal A and not equal A in the same manner at the same time. So it is not true to say Arthur is talking and Arthur is not talking in the same moment in the same sense. And the third law of logic is what's called the law of the excluded middle. This law basically says either a statement is true or it's false. There's no in between. So Arthur is talking is either true, a true statement, or it's either a not true statement. There's no in between. So these are relatively non-controversial in theory. And me and Ash will answer any questions, or maybe not any, but we'll try to answer your questions at the end. So if you have any questions about this or objections, you could just write them down. Um, so like I said, this presentation is on objective truth. And you may be wondering what objective truth is and are there different types of truth? And this is a good question. So objectivity as a characteristic of something is usually referring to that thing either being unchanging or unbiased. That's what it means for something to be objective, unchanging or unbiased. For the most part, I'm going to refer to it as unchanging. There's also truth that is subjective. Something that is subjective is subject to change, and it can change or vary based on preference. So things that are objective are things that are true regardless of what anyone thinks. For example, regardless of what anyone thinks or how they feel, 1 plus 1 equals 2. And if no humans were alive, that wouldn't change anything. That statement would still be true. But something that's subjective would be the answer to what is your favorite color. Um, and I just want to clarify, if there's disagreement about something, that doesn't mean that it's subjective. Because in my math class, we disagree about the solution to problems all the time. But that doesn't mean that there's multiple solutions. Usually there's only one solution. And so why does this matter? Well, in the name of inclusion, objectivity, and honestly reason have been thrown out the window. The problem with that is that the gospel goes right out with everything else if such a view were correct. So we need to know how to respond to this. So people will say, I have my truth, you have your truth. And I have two quotes right here, two examples of that. There is your truth and there's my truth. As for the universal truth, it does not exist. In the end, your past is not my past, your truth is not my truth, and your solution is not my solution. So this could be true for some things, things that regard preference, but it can't be true about objective claims about reality. And oftentimes people extrapolate this idea of different truths to objective things when it's only supposed to be subjective things. So I've had this happen to me. I'll tell someone the gospel and they say, oh, I love that you're passionate about Jesus. I agree with you. I like what you said. But then they also say, oh, I just believe in a higher power. Oh, I believe in the universe. I think the universe will do me good. And then they'll say, we really worship the same God. The problem with this is not an instance where we can both be right. This isn't a subjective instance. Um, the God I believe in is not the universe. The God I believe in created the universe. And so this idea of the universe, that's specifically New Age. We'll talk about that maybe in a future presentation. But we realize that not all religions can be true. And that's Christianity standard, that's Jesus standard, and that's logic standard. Buddhism and Hinduism, they all say that there's millions of gods. But Christianity says there's only one God. Islam says Jesus wasn't crucified and that he wasn't God. But Christianity hinges on the fact that Jesus was God and that he was crucified and raised again. So Christianity and Islam and New Age and Buddhism and Hinduism, they can't all be true because they contradict each other. So you might be listening and saying, this is obvious. Why we talk about this? Well, because it's more prevalent than you might think. In the later half of the 20th century, we witnessed the destruction of many of these basic fundamental ideas. And in the 21st century, we're seeing and feeling the effects of it. The fundamental philosophy which dominates today's culture is called postmodernism. So, in the 20th century, modernism was still dominant. And this was basically the idea, and it stemmed from the Enlightenment, that we could use reason, we could use science, and we could obtain the answer to any problem. However, this philosophy, which claimed to lead to the solution to problems, coincided with the bloodiest century in history. The 20th century, when it was most prevalent, was the bloodiest century in history. And so there was this big disagreement between this idea saying we're going to get answers, and then this other reality that we're not getting answers, and tons of people are dying. And so what happened was modernism started to get abandoned. And what happened was there was a development of postmodernism. So modernism said truth is real, truth is noble, but postmodernism abandoned that. And this was driven by something called relativism. This is the idea that all truth is merely a matter of opinion. Um, this idea of relativism gave way to pluralism, which said if truth is just an opinion, you need to value everyone's opinion and you need to respect it as equals. And this is honestly where we are today. We're told to have tolerance, yet tolerance has changed from tolerance to being acceptance, and that is intolerable. And this is something we have to deal with. It's a reality of our society, but that doesn't mean we can't fight against it. Postmodernism is filled with a bunch of nice sounding claims, but we can quickly dismantle them if we just use reason. If someone says there is no truth, which is a popular claim, you just have to ask them, is that true? When you have a self-refuting statement, you can't do anything but abandon it or abandon truth. If someone says, what's true for you is true for you, what's true for me is true for me, you could ask them these three questions. And Ash will bring them up a lot, I'll bring them up a lot. They come from a book called, I forgot what it's called, but it's by Greg Kokel. And it
Tactics?
Yeah, Tactics. It says, how did you arrive at that conclusion? Or it's, what do you mean by that? How did you arrive at that conclusion? And have you considered? And then you could explain these things that I'm talking about. You can explain to them that something can't be contradictory and true. And then you can, and then if they go back and say, well, truth doesn't exist, ask them the same question. Is that true? The relativism and pluralism of postmodernism, it poisons our reality. Because when we operate under the assumption that there is no truth, we'll always be wrong because there is indeed truth. If postmodernism is true, then postmodernism is not true. That's how inconsistent this philosophy is. It contradicts its own ideas. These ideas, they're basic logic. It's not hard to realize. And this is probably one of the less complex presentations we'll do, but we really need to give attention to it because if people don't believe in truth, we can't communicate the gospel truth to them. And so I wanted to end with an excerpt from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and it says, if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have and deliver up my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So this is crucial. We employ apologetics because we need to. We need to defend our faith and we need to spread the truth about Jesus. But we can never get lost in our arguments and reasons at the expense of love. What I talked about today is something it's very widespread and it's becoming even more widespread. But when you encounter someone that you're trying to spread the gospel to or you're defending Christianity, don't immediately bring up these terms. If someone comes up to you and starts using all these big philosophy words, you're just going to be intimidated. You don't want to talk to them. So we just have to simplify things when we actually encounter people. But I wanted to use all these operational definitions so that you guys will be built up, so that you know the history of these things, so that we can respond to them. And then when you do encounter someone who does hold to postmodernism, that does say there is no truth, just go back to those questions. Is that true? How did you arrive at that conclusion? What do you mean by that? Have you considered? And we always have to do this in love and respect. The first way that we put our foot in the door with these exchanges is relationship. But oftentimes we don't see a lot of people much, or we don't see people a lot of times. We might only see someone once, and we want to use every opportunity. And that's why you use these questions. So in conclusion, we have to know that objective truth is not a holy grail. Not all religions can be true, and truth is real and is knowable.
All right, that was really awesome. Thank you, Arthur. Those are really great finishing words. Just that truth and love are to go together. One cannot be without the other. Truth without love, it just comes out hard. No one's going to want to hear it. And love without truth, it's lame. It has no purpose. So yeah, just truth and love, it goes together. So that's important to remember as we do apologetics.